So, Sean, how do you see the evolution of music leadership and collaborative work panning out over the coming years? And what continuing role do you think Orchestras Live has to play in all of this?
I think I feel we're on the crest of a whole new phase and sort of wave of this work. I think as you were rightly acknowledging, it's this sort of conflict isn't quite the right word, but there's this strange paradox at the moment where the demand and the call for this type of work, the work we're talking about, and the sort of skill sets and leadership, creative leadership that needs to come with that, is bigger than ever. And we carry still, I think, a great reputation as a country, the
Hmm.
UK, in terms of sort of leading the way in terms of other ways of participating in the arts and working with orchestras. And yet, there is, and we sell ourselves as a country pretty well, I think, in terms of that. And yet we haven't, it doesn't feel we've quite got the resource or the infrastructure that we should have in order to really enable that. And so I think there's a couple of things. I think there is a need for almost a new wave of leadership training, and it's something thinking very carefully about at Guildhall. We continue to do the work. It's embedded in all sorts of ways, as it is in many other training institutions and indeed within orchestras and arts organisations who have their modelling. Um, I think what we've lost, certainly Guilt, is perhaps the courses that were explicitly about leadership, music
Right.
lead. We used to have a postgraduate leadership course, and we even had an undergraduate program for a while, which had musicians and spoken word artists and actors working together for all sorts of reasons. And I think the pandemic played a big part of this. Things just changed and priorities had to be realigned and reworked and rethought, combined with, I think, the fact that a lot of this work is becoming more embedded in our thinking anyway, as we've been acknowledging. But then you can start to lose the focus and, perhaps the need, the sight of where actual continuing investment is needed to bring things on, in the long term. And I think that then plays into orchestras as well. So along with, I think, a new wave of training and leadership, and perhaps thinking differently about how we model that. Is it just through a particular institution? Could we do that more explicitly in partnership? How do we model that? Is it more sort of modular and on a lifelong learning basis, which plays into what I'm thinking about at Guildhall, or is it sort of more set as a postgraduate or master's course or whatever? Uh, and then we have orchestras and other arts organizations who have so many challenges just in terms of the economic, financial survival, to
Yeah.
put it. You can't put it more bluntly than that. But I think part of this phase we're going through about survival and how we keep going, there's real scope, as happened back in the 80s, of some radical rethink in terms of how we model what we're there to do. And that is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, at the end of the day, orchestras are orchestras. They should do what they really do well, and
Hmm.
live music making and performing is at the heart of that. At the same time, what if um, the type of work we're talking about became even more central to the role an orchestra plays in terms of how it programs and plans, allocates its funding, and indeed thinks about the types of players and musicians it wants to employ for those particular projects. Now, I'm not saying that's not been thought about. I think it is in lots of different and exciting ways, but it's harnessing that as a sector, harnessing that in terms of training, and harnessing it with those who we really work in partnership with, not least arts and culture sector itself, but equally the social justice sector, the healthcare sector, and really think what it would be to have a long-term vision, 10 years plus, of putting musicians and ensembles and these sorts of projects into the community. I think that's what we need now, taking on board where we are as a society, what the needs of society are now, and also recognizing that people love making music, they love singing, they love creating, they love participating as much as they ever did. So why on earth would we deny people that opportunity? And why on earth would we not provide at least some of the resource to get that next phase of work going?
certainly from our side at Orchestras Live, we see more demand than ever and more opportunity than ever for skilled artists, including orchestras, to really benefit and enrich societies and people of all kinds. There's so much more to do. But as long as we keep doing it, that's what's important, isn't it? That we don't become disenchanted by all the challenges and barriers, which undoubtedly there are.
I couldn't agree more, so just quickly, if you don't mind adding one there, something I found myself coming back to as a reference point, particularly for orchestras, is actually something that Pierre Boulez, of all people, said in the 1980s, I think it was about orchestras being ensembles of possibilities,
Mm,
and I do feel, funnily enough, yes, this seismic change that has happened since the 80s has enabled us to move to that. And ensembles of possibilities are what sit at the heart of these community and education projects, and the role that a creative leader plays in relation to that, which has, dare I say, a conducting side to it, but it's much more subtle than nuanced than that. And I think to revisit that, what for orchestras, not just for this work, what constitutes an ensemble of possibilities
mm.
now in the 2020s when the landscape is changing, when we need to diversify our workforce for sure.
Well, I think that's an excellent note to end on, Sean, and it's been great to talk these things through. You've reminded me of certain things from many years ago, which were formative in all of this. But it's great to know that there's a lot more energy still being put into ensuring that this continues to evolve. So thank you very much indeed for talking today, and it's been wonderful to catch up and have your thoughts.